Well, folks, I have high noon. I know other folks will be joining us as we go on through. Want to welcome you from wherever you may be from. I'm Steve Schmidt. I'm an adult education consultant, and I'll be working this afternoon with Greg Stoltz, or this afternoon if you're on the East Coast, who is an education sales consultant and the training coordinator with New Readers Press. And I've been involved in adult education for almost 30 years, and I'm excited to present today's session on teaching tactics for high school equivalency test success. But really at the time frame that we have, I guess really should call it teaching tactic is what we're going to be doing today in the interest of time. But I first want to say thank you so much to every adult educator who's on our webinar this afternoon. Really appreciate you, really appreciate what you do. You know, adult education has always been a tough and a challenging job, and certainly no more so than what we've dealt with over the past year and a half with the pandemic. But thank you for making a difference each and every day. We appreciate you, and so glad that you're here with us this afternoon or this morning if you're on the West Coast. So my first question is this: why do I love New Readers Press? And the answer to that is a very easy one. New Readers Press, believe it or not, and a lot of people don't know this, is a nonprofit organization. Every dollar of quote unquote profit that is created goes to support Pro Literacy, which is an amazing organization that supports adult literacy efforts and initiatives around the world and really does some amazing things. We could take the whole half-hour session and talk about that, but that is one reason why I love New Readers Press. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, in the short time that we have, we're going to talk a little bit about Webb's depth of knowledge, just really enough to kind of set the stage for today. The big thing that we're going to do is talk about the Think Aloud teaching technique, which is a wonderful technique and is one that is probably underutilized by adult educators. I think K-12 instruction, they do this a lot more and they may be more familiar with it, but we'll talk about ways that we can make the Think Aloud work. And then at the tail end of today's session, Greg Stoltz from New Readers Press will show you how you can use some New Readers Press materials to use in the Think Aloud technique. So that is our plan for today. Hope that sounds fair. And so again, if you haven't accessed the handout, there is a link in the chat. You can click on that bit.ly link and it'll take you right there. And perhaps Dan and Greg can help folks if they're struggling with trying to find that link. So just briefly, I want to talk about Webb's depth of knowledge and why it's important and why we're talking about these teaching techniques that can help students with Webb's. Well, Webb's depth of knowledge is essentially like a finish line for learning. It shows the type of thinking that students need to do in order to run the race, if we can use that metaphor, that analogy that gets them to the finish line. And so what we do with Webb's really answers the question of how deeply that students need to think in order to perform whatever learning task that we're asking them to do. And one of the big misconceptions about Webb's depth of knowledge is it measures how hard or how easy. No, it doesn't. Webb's depth of knowledge doesn't measure how easy or hard a question is. It really measures, the fancy term is the cognitive complexity, or in other words, what type of thinking are we really asking students to do? And so since I believe, and research has shown that analogies are really the secret sauce of teaching, wherein when we do analogies, when we relate new information to that which students already know, it makes new learning so much easier because we can build on those brain pathways that have already been established in those neural networks that look like little trees. Already the roots and the trunk are already established, so to speak, and we can then build on the branches and the leaves. So in looking at Webb's depth of knowledge, wonderful work done by Eric Francis, where he compared the different levels of Webb's depth of knowledge to different TV shows, different game shows. We're not going to get into depth of knowledge level 1, which he compares to Jeopardy because they're like knowledge level questions: who, what, when, where, why. Level 2 and level 3 are really the ones we're going to focus on because that is the majority of questions on your high school equivalency test, whether you're doing GED, whether you're involved with HISET, or whether you're involved with task for the next month before that phases out. So Webb's depth of knowledge level 2 questions are like the Great British Baking Show, if you're familiar with that, or Hell's Kitchen, or any of these reality TV shows where they invite cooks or chefs on the show and challenge their cooking abilities. These folks already know how to cook. They're really just asked to apply their learning. And so Webb's depth of knowledge level 2 questions really ask students to be able to apply. That's the key word. If we were looking for one word to say depth of knowledge level 2, it's application. So students are asked to apply their learning. How can they use facts? How can they use the concepts? How can they use the procedures that they've learned in order to do learning tasks? And this shows up on high school equivalency test in questions like comparing and contrasting, cause and effect, using information that might be from both text and a visual in order to solve a multi-step problem. That's how we'd see it on the high school equivalency test. So really the key thing with level 2 is application. Level 3, which we also see a number of questions on the high school equivalency test, if I had to point to a keyword on that, that word would be analysis. And so it's similar to the Survivor TV show that's been on for the past 20 years, where these contestants on this reality show try to be the last one standing. But they do it. It's really, even though there's physical tasks involved, it's really a mental contest as the contestants create strategies. They form alliances and they make decisions in real time based on a constantly changing environment. So in depth of knowledge level 3, a lot of how and why questions. Students are asked to justify their thinking. They're asked to make inferences. They're asked to draw conclusions. We may see this on the high school equivalency where they've got to solve several multi-step problems that involve using information from a variety of sources. They have to create solutions and explain their reasoning for doing so. So we see this mostly well illustrated on the writing test or the RLA test in the GED, where students are asked to analyze 2 arguments, explain which one is better and why. So that's a tough thing to do. And so these depth of knowledge level 3 questions are very cognitively challenging as we have to analyze. So with that background laid, who cares? Well, the big thing is why we should care is because not only for high school equivalency that the vast majority of questions are at DOK levels 2 and 3, as you can see this example from the GED test. This is very similar to HISET. This is very similar to task as well. All of these are in the 70 to 80% range. But even deeper than that, even deeper than the high school equivalency, is the fact that the modern workforce demands thinking, and machines can do the brute calculation that we used to hire folks to do. Now we are hiring folks to think and analyze data and do difficult problem solving in the workplace. So all learning these skills are all things that are going to help our students succeed, not only on the high school equivalency test, but also in life and in the workforce. So one of the teaching techniques that we're going to do is called, well, the teaching technique that we're going to do is called the Think Aloud. And I love the Think Aloud because it can really help develop students' ability to do Webb's depth of knowledge level 2 and level 3 thinking. An analogy for the Think Aloud is it's like you're eavesdropping on someone's thinking. We could see the gentleman here in this picture is eavesdropping on someone else. He's listening to this conversation through the wall. So what we do as instructors with the Think Aloud technique is we are showing our students how we think as we read a passage, as maybe we look at some type of a graphic, or maybe as we do a math problem. We show them how we would tackle it. We show them how we, who are more of an expert thinker about how we tackle this learning task. And through watching us do so, students learn how to think. And the science behind this is really amazing. This works, and this being the think aloud, this works because of things in our brain called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are amazing, and we probably don't even understand a whole completely how they work. But from what we do understand, it's amazing how they work. Mirror neurons function in that they respond to actions we see done by others. Our neurons in our brains will respond as if we are actually doing it ourselves. Whoa, let me say that again. When we see some other people doing something, a learning task, for example, our neurons will respond as if we are actually doing it ourselves. And one thing I like to think about with this is, as I became a parent years ago, had children years ago, my oldest is now 20, I noticed that I would become my parents in terms of the things that I would say and the things that I would do. And I was thinking, like, where on earth did that come from? I hadn't heard them say this, because my son was born when I was 40 years old. So it was a long time since I was in my parents' home. And I'm thinking this was where we saw this with mirror neurons. We saw them say things, we saw them do things, and we have internalized that because of mirror neurons. So it's just amazing how they work, and how learning how to think from seeing someone else think is such a powerful technique. Now, one thing before I show you a brief demonstration of doing the think aloud is that think aloud is not direct instruction. I have shared the think aloud technique in various face-to-face workshops and other things. And then I always like to have instructors practice what I've taught. And I did this at one time, and I remember listening to two instructors as they did this. And the first thing that one instructor said to the other, they asked them a question that they expected them to answer. And I was thinking, I have failed completely in showing how the think aloud works, because you are not asking students questions during a think aloud. So what I'd like to do here, and you can see demonstrated in this slide, is that there is a difference between a think aloud and direct instruction. We're very familiar with direct instruction. I do, where the instructor models and demonstrates. We do, where the students are picking up more responsibility and working along on whatever task we're teaching, whatever thing we're teaching. And then finally, you do, while students are independently doing the learning thing that the instructor has done. But a think aloud is different. The instructor is modeling their thinking for students. In other words, they are taking that invisible thought process that is going on inside their brains, and they are verbalizing it and making it clear to students how they are thinking through whatever learning task they're doing, reading a passage, solving a math problem, going over a visual, whatever. So what are students supposed to do during a think aloud? Well, they are supposed to be watching and really looking closely at seeing how the instructor thinks. And that's what they're supposed to pick up on. And then we're allowing those mirror neurons to work and help that student be able to use that type of thinking when they are doing a reading passage or whatever later. So we should not, in a think aloud, be asking students questions. We should be asking ourselves questions and then answering them, so students can see how we're thinking and how our brain is working. So I hope that we see this distinction between these two techniques. If we're really thinking about the think aloud, it's most similar to the I do part of direct instruction, but it's different because, again, we as instructors are trying to show how we think through a task. And then through viewing that, the students will say, oh yeah, okay, I see how my instructor did this. And so therefore I am going to adopt similar methods when I am faced with a math problem or reading passage or whatever learning task I'm trying to do. So I hope that makes this a little bit more clear about how that works. And we'll certainly have some time. I see some questions come up. We'll certainly have some time for questions as we go through. So I'm going to do a brief demonstration of a think aloud, and I'm going to ask you to unpack this in the chat box. In other words, I'll be asking you after I do the think aloud, what did I do to make my thinking visible? So your mission is to watch me as I do this, listen to me as I do this, because you can't really see me, and think about how did I make my thinking visible. So I'm not starting yet, and I'll tell you when I do so. This particular graphic comes from the Social Studies for the HISET publication from New Readers Press. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the think aloud. Are you ready? Okay. Everybody's saying, yes, we're ready, Steve. Go ahead and do it. Okay. So guys, I'm going to do a think aloud. I'm going to show you how I'm thinking through as I deal with this graphic or I deal with this map, try to make sense of it. What I want you to do as I'm going through this is really see how I'm thinking. And we'll talk about after we finish what I did and the decisions that I made as I was looking at this graphic. So does that sound fair? I just really want you to look and pay careful attention to how I am thinking through. What steps do I go through as I'm thinking through and trying to make sense of this map? So does that sound fair? Any questions? Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and start this think aloud. Okay, so I'm looking at this graphic, I'm looking at this visual, and I see it's a map. And one thing that I know about maps is it's always important to look first at the title to see what that tells me. And then secondly, I'm going to look to see if there's any type of a legend or any type of a box that's near the map that would help to give me some more information about what's in the map. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at and see what the title is. And it says US infant mortality rate in 2010. Okay, so I'm believing that this is talking about infant mortality. Now I know that an infant is a newly born child. And let's see, mortality, that's a tricky word, but I believe that mort, I've learned that mort means death, like something like a mortgage is a death pledge that you pledge to pay off a house or a piece of land before you die. And mortality, I believe, means death rate. So really what this map is going to show is infant death rates during the year 2010. So that helps a lot. So any questions about this, I know must be dealing with in some way the death rate of children who are newly born in 2010. So now I'm going to look for the legend, sometimes called a key. I can see it here. It's in the, to the right of the map. And I do notice this looks familiar. This is a map of the United States. So I see different colors on the map, and these colors should be telling me something. I see that some colors are darker, like here in the state of Minnesota. I see that some colors are lighter, like here in the state of Alabama. And this legend tells me what the deal is. It seems to me like the darker the color, it says less than 5. Oh, and it says rate per 1,000 births. So in other words, it's going to be how many babies die per 1,000 births. And pardon me for my bad writing. Anytime I write with a mouse, it's always hard. I guess if I wrote with my mouth, it would be hard as well. So anyway, so this is saying in the light colors that 8 out of 1,000 babies, newly born babies, are going to pass, going to die. So it seems to me that the lighter the color, the more deaths occur. So as we look from dark to light, it seems there's fewer with the darker colors and more with the lighter colors. So kind of this brownish color, there's going to be less than 5. But as I get lighter and lighter and lighter and down to this almost clear, there's going to be a greater number of infant deaths. So always when I look at maps and charts and graphs, I'm always looking for the trend. Is there patterns? Is something going on that I can learn from? And so what I'm going to try to do is look at this map and I'm going to try to see, are there clusters? In other words, are there groups of similar colors that are together? And if there are, I may try to think about why that might be. So I'm noticing by looking here at the map that I do see a lot of darker colors, especially here in the far west, California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Alaska. And they're still fairly dark as we move to the more Midwest, Minnesota, Iowa. And I see also some patches of darkness here in New England, where part of the dark color of Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New Jersey, I see some dark there. So that's bringing up some questions. I'm wondering why those dark colors again means fewer babies are dying when they're born. Why is that? Is that because there's better access to hospitals and patient care? Is that because there's some characteristic about the people that live in these states? I don't know. Those are just some things to think about. Where do I see clusters of light? In other words, a higher infant death rate. Why I'm looking is I'm looking here at the Southeast and I see my own state of North Carolina and South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama. It does appear that there's a greater infant mortality rate. And again, I'm asking, why is that? What's going on with healthcare in the Southeast? And I see also in the Midwestern states of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, there are also some lighter, in West Virginia, they're a lighter color too. So I'm wondering, why is that? What is causing that? So those are some things to think about. Okay, I'm stopping the Think Aloud and we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled thought process here. So in the chat box, please, what did I do to make my thinking visible? How did I take those invisible thoughts that were going through my mind and how did I make those visible? So I'm going to ask you to do that, please, in the chat. Let's see. I do see a couple of questions where Amy Rowe mentioned, does mirror neuron enhanced learning work much better face-to-face than via Zoom or phone instruction? Amy, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer to that. My suspicion would be probably not, but I don't know. I do think mirror neurons are powerful, and I do think they can work either way, whether there's a dilution factor due to the remote nature, I do not know. I haven't seen statistics, but thank you. That's a great question. So appreciate those questions. Let's see. So in the chat, what I would hope that we would be doing, please, is talking about how I made my thinking beautiful. Let's see here. Virginia has asked a great question about abortion. I don't know that abortion necessarily is reflected here. I do think it's live births. So, but that's a good thought. That's definitely a question that we want to answer, Virginia. Excellent. Let's see here. Danny said, I underline important info like the title and keywords. So that was one way. Deborah mentions you said out loud your thoughts. Great. Diana mentions the combo of verbal and what you highlighted. Okay. Anne says you described the information. You asked yourself questions. You started out with information you already knew. Beautiful. Let's see, Deborah mentioned I asked questions as I went. Let's see, Anita said I slowed everything down and made my inferential thinking explicit. Well, I always talk fast when I'm excited, Anita, so I hope I slowed things down. Anyway, let's see, Roseanne mentioned self-talk. I like that, well said. Let's see, and Anne mentioned they are live bursts. That is indeed correct. Let's see, Barb mentions for adult ed students, this is important because many don't know the terms that you explained, like legend mortality. And I agree, Barb. I could have done a more explicit job of explaining what those things were. Megan mentioned, I'm wondering, good. Let's see, Karen mentions about questioning myself. I shared my thoughts, thank you, Peggy. Mark said I walked slowly through the process of decoding. Good. And there's so many good comments there. I wish I had time to say everyone. And thank you for everyone who put that in there. And let's see. Oh, Karen Welch used the peeled back the information from there. Well said, Karen. I would expect nothing less from you. Okay, beautiful. So, but the think aloud, again, is something that can be done. A YouTube video where Meg Schofield, an awesome instructor, does a think aloud with a passage. And so that is great. And we could do this also with math problems there. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. And again, I'll be looking in the chat and the Q&A, and I'm going to turn things over to Greg Stoltz. We saw some things regarding the Think Aloud. Greg is a wonderful person who works for New Readers Press. I've known Greg for many years, and my mentor in adult education said, Steve, if you go to a conference, skip a couple sessions and go talk to vendors. They are incredibly knowledgeable, and they can give you some wonderful information about not only products, but about teaching techniques and learning. And I took that message to heart, and I've met wonderful people through the years like Greg Stoltz and other wonderful people, Gary Rubin, Jeff Gumas, who really helped.
If you can hear me, Steve, we've lost your audio just now. And so let's give the screen over to Greg.
Well, thank you, Dan. And Steve, if you're still on board and listening, thank you so much for that introduction and your kind words. Always great to have you on board for these webinars. Hi, everyone. I'm going to spend these last 5 minutes or so giving you a quick look at some New Readers Press resources that teachers support the Think Aloud strategy, if not exactly the way Steve shared with us today, then at least very supportive of the technique and really helping students with their critical thinking process. Before I do, I'd like to make 2 quick points. First, I'd like to say this. Just because a student reads or scores at a lower level doesn't mean she or he thinks at a lower level. And I'm sure that you would all agree. And the second, that is that, high school equivalency test prep doesn't always happen at the 9th or 10th grade reading level. So keeping those 2 points in mind, I'll give you an example or 2 here. First, our 4-level Breakthrough to Math series is written at reading level 3 to 5, but it takes students from basic skills with whole numbers to fractions, decimals, and percents to algebra to geometry. Designed specifically to help students overcome learning obstacles and develop math confidence, the skills are broken down into very basic steps by focusing on one skill at a time. Each book delivers short, manageable chunks of information on each page with plenty of white space to make the instruction less intimidating and more accessible. The first 5 pages of the teacher's guide touch on topics like math phobia and anxiety, difference in student needs and learning styles, and tips for effective instruction. And then the next 4 pages recommend 2 instructional strategies to be used consistently, providing clear explanations and step-by-step instructions. They are today's topic, the Think Aloud technique, and we'll be doing a follow-up lunch and learn in January. It'll be the Steve and Greg team up again, and that is on the problem-solving process. Here's just a quick example from level 4, book 3, Circles and Volume. As you can see, the problem is laid out so that the student can easily apply the Think Aloud strategy, even modeling thinking aloud by asking questions in the first person. So what do I need to do to get the answer? add, subtract, multiply, divide, provide a definition, draw a diagram, or use a formula. So here, yes, it's giving in a way, in a sense, direct, or explicit instruction, but it's also setting the student up so that she or he just starts to habitually think aloud as she or he reads this. Next, I'd like to call out our Score Boost series for the TABE 11-12, Score Boost for CASAS, Score Boost for GED, and Score Boost for HISET. Although these 4 series span nearly 60 workbooks over 4 levels, they have in common the same lesson structure and methodology. One key feature found in every lesson of every workbook, of every level, of every Score Boost series is the think prompt. It looks like this. So think prompts and or their answers are often written in first person and model critical thinking. Encouraging the students to read these thoughts aloud forms good habits and builds critical thinking muscles. Here it is in the guided practice of CASAS Math Level C, and I'll blow it up so that we can see it better. So here's one. Perimeter is the distance around a shape. I need to find the length and the width of the rectangle using the distance between the points. So you see here it's laid out step by step, but then part of that step is to think aloud. As we continue on in part B, I can find area by multiplying the length and width of a rectangle. And here in the TABE Level M language book for Score Boost, I'll read here the think. What words in the first sentence connect to a phrase in the second sentence? What other connections can I find? So once again, critical thinking being modeled here as the student thinks aloud. And here's an example from the Score Boost for the GED Math Algebraic Reasoning Workbook. I can use exponent rules to simplify the powers. I'm looking for the number that when multiplied by itself 4 times equals 16. And again, the steps as they walk through and talk through the problem. Again, every lesson, every unit, every book, every series. And here's a great example from the HISET essay writing book. Blow that up. All the options begin omit, so I'll check each sentence against the topic sentence to see if it contributes to the main idea. The one that doesn't should be removed. Then I'll check my answer by rereading the paragraph without that sentence. Next one. I need to read paragraph 2 and evaluate all the choices to see which one improves the flow and unity of the paragraph. Right? Even the test-wise feature at the bottom features, it directs the student to ask her or himself a question. Let's see, to decide whether a sentence should be removed. Ask yourself, does this sentence help support the paragraph's main idea or does it distract the reader? The Think It Through feature in the social studies and science for the GED books can also be used to practice the think aloud technique. We'll blow that one up. Here it is. Think it through. What's the cartoon about? What's the question asking? Which choice is correct? As they walk through the question. And here, the science for the GED test. Again, stressing consistent methodology and reinforcement. This skill is practiced in every lesson in these books. The think it through. What's the question asking? What happens during a rear end collision to cause whiplash? And I'm looking at the time. I know we're out of time, but I will say this in closing. For more information, whether to view sample pages, correlations to the national standards, pricing, or to find your state sales rep, visit our website at newreaderspress.com. I'll show you that in just a second. Let's see. In fact, let me jump now Oh, change, new share.
We can see the website page. Oh, you're going to actually go to the website. Sorry, Greg.
That's what I'm going to do. Here we are. It's newreaderspress.com. And you'll find here at the top, find a sales rep. You'll also see here our specials. There are promotions from time to time. Here's a Black Friday, save 10% through the 6th. Promotional code, and our December special, which is free shipping on any order of $300 or more, be a great time to apply that to maybe a score boost or a breakthrough to math purchase or whatever your needs may be. On behalf of Pro Literacy Readers Press, I'd like to say thank you so much, first of all, to Steve. Steve, again, thanks for your expertise and your time today. You are a wellspring of information, and your words are, it carry a lot of weight. So thank you so much for your help today, and looking forward to doing this again with you next month. And most of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of you who joined us today. Thank you for what you do in your community, for your adult learners. Keep on doing what you're doing. You are greatly appreciated, not only by your students, but by us as well.